This isn't who you wanted to be. Surviving in this world with a narcissistic ex is incredibly complicated. Unfortunately, as a result of that, you are going to have to change to be able to adapt and survive in this environment. You're also going to have to adopt some narcissistic traits. Now, what do I mean by that? What I'm talking about is when dealing with your ex, you're going to have to adopt some of those characteristics like not having empathy, not having emotions or feelings towards your ex, and not having guilt or second guessing yourself. And ultimately, and you already know this, you cannot be trusting of them. You always have to have them in a frame of mind or in a position to where you're suspect of everything they're doing. Because if you do exercise empathy or emotions or guilt or even second guessing yourself around them, they will utilize that to burrow under your defenses to try to get back in, get you second guessing yourself and thinking that the situation was wrong, and more than likely that you are the one who caused all these problems. You're responsible for everything, and that you should feel guilty for what you've done. So bottom line, this can be a constant struggle. You're basically going against your own true nature. You probably already have noticed that right now, to where you have already, just because you have to, right? It's like an inevitable switch where you start changing the way you are to deal with your ex. You're already probably more angry, more frustrated, and more tense around them, period, right? Which is probably not your normal nature either. You're probably a person who's very empathetic, very caring, very much so looking at what the other person is doing and thinking, and second guessing yourself that maybe, are you doing things right? Or are you doing things wrong? You also want to see the best in people. All of us who've been goat roped into these situations, part of the reason is because we want to see the best. We expect the best. And the problem with this is your ex might also be saying that they just wanted to see the best in you. They just wanted to try to only think of the good things. I mean, they're really masters at basically turning your own thoughts and words against you. You're probably not a person who typically cuts off your emotions. I mean, even if you are a guy, and I know guys have a tendency to suppress their emotions, but guys still have emotions. You still have feelings. You may not express them in the same way that other people express them, but they're still there. And it's not easy to shut it off, to shut everything down and pretend like nothing's bothering you. So when you're caught up in this, you can, and you're modifying your own behavior, and you're basically becoming a person that you never really intended to be. You can get stuck in this mode where you're constantly questioning yourself and who you are. You can actually be thinking, this person that I'm turning into, is that really who I am? Is that really who I've always been? Maybe I'm the one with the facade. Now that goes into the whole thing of when you start questioning if you're a narcissist or not. But even whenever you start adopting some of these different behaviors that are absolutely counterintuitive to the type of person you really are, it really starts to undermine your own self-worth and your ability to think about yourself. So then you get into the question of how can they, right? And what I'm talking about in that regard is, how can they act like everything is normal? Have you noticed that sometimes whenever you are in a situation with them, they pretend like everything's normal? I've talked about this in other videos where early on, while I was being portrayed as this monster, I would go to school functions, and my ex, my daughter, this is the one time that really stuck out in my mind on this, is I went to a school function for my daughter's third grade class. I think it was third grade class. And, this is right in the middle of the divorce. This is, everything's coming down. All these, the responsive declarations are coming around saying that I'm a danger to the kids and all this stuff. And I walk into this room and I'm petrified, right? Because I have this person who's making all these allegations, and I'm like, what are they going to do next? Are they gonna start screaming that that I did something to them, and everyone's gonna believe, and then I'm gonna be hauled off, right? I mean, you can get caught up in that whole fear and everything about that. And in that particular situation, what happened is I remember walking in there and she was nice as pie. Like everything was normal, and I was keeping my distance. And at one point, whenever they were like, okay, kids, show your parents what's on your desk. And, the ex like, oh, there's a chair right here. Why don't you sit right here? And I'm like, what? How can you be saying one thing on paper with your attorney and right now you're acting like nothing is absolutely wrong? Well, bottom line is it's all an act, right? And generally when they feel like they're in control, then they can act like everything's normal because in their mind, they have the upper hand, they have control, they are able to, act like that. And conversely, what enables that or supplies them is whenever you are nervous. Like in my situation, I was nervous. I was like, I don't want to be next to you, it's like, well, why are you acting like that? There's nothing wrong, right? I mean, that type of situation. And that empowers them more because then they know that they have you. But let me ask you this. Have you noticed what happens when they start to lose that control or when their act slips or when that facade starts to break down? Typically, that everything is normal act starts to slip as well. So bottom line, since everything is for show and everything is an illusion, nothing is real. And here's the deal, is when you start adopting some of these tactics and you're modifying your behavior and becoming this person that you don't really like, but if you can do a little bit of that, you can use those same tactics against them. Now, I know I've talked about this in the past, but I'll go ahead and bring up this example because this is something that I went through as well. And it was awards ceremonies or assemblies for my older kids. Now, initially, the ex would always end up there first, right? And initially what would happen is I didn't want to be anywhere near her, so I would stay away. I would like, nope, I'll just sit in the back. And the way it played itself out is she would be there, the kids would be there. The kids would finally, because they're looking, they're going to be looking for both parents. They finally they do the whole wave thing. And it was, it's kind of like, well, why don't you sit here, right? And initially I was like, that's okay. I'm good right here. I take pictures. So I'd be like, well, I'll just be in the back taking pictures. It's, it's like old times, right? But what I'll tell you is what I started to do is I would get there early and I would do the same thing. And I know I've said this in the past, right? So initially that's the way it was. We're like, oh, well, I'm here. You can sit here. Oh, it's so sad that you don't want to sit with us. Oh, well, I guess you're just angry, right? Part of that whole, illusion and victim campaign that they do. But what I'll tell you is whenever I switched and I started being early and I did the same thing, whenever, typically what would happen is I would get there first, and then either the kids would show up or the ex would show up, and I'd be like, oh, right here, I saved a spot for you. Now, initially, right after I started doing that, the funny part is she stopped showing up to a lot of the ceremonies, and even the last one that I went to where she showed up, I had front row. And, she didn't have a place to sit. And I'm like, there's a place right here, And it's whenever you can detach, right? Whenever you can adopt those things. Like I turned off my anger. I turned off my empathy. I turned off there wasn't any guilt or anything on there. But I basically shut my emotions down so I could just pretend that everything was fine during those events. Okay, but the deal is when you're going through this, part of the struggle can be that you feel like you're changing. You feel like you're not the person, your core person, like I was talking about before. The thing is, at your core, you still are you. You're still that same person, and you're slowly going to get that person back. You're slowly going to be able to disentangle from your ex and start to calm yourself down, start to get back to that more grounded, calm, centered person that you probably were before. And in the off chance that you've grown up in a life of chaos and maybe you came from a family of origin that was chaotic, and so maybe, you haven't had the experience of having a chaos-free environment, you can slowly get that back too. And guys, I will tell you that once you start removing that chaos out of your life, it really starts to change everything. And then what happens is whenever chaos starts coming back into your life, you don't want any part of it. So it's okay to have your defenses up when you're around your ex, or you're around flying monkeys, or you're around surrogates. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I know that it can feel unnatural and not how you typically are. I know for me, I'm a pretty trusting person. I have been described as having a Pollyanna, method or way of looking at things, where it's kind of like everything is great, right? You always look for the best in things, even to your own detriment and to your own, basically you're blinded by what's going on and you just think everything is great. I think a lot of us have that same type of system, or not system, but same type of issue, because if you don't, when you're living in this environment, you will go crazy. You have to make some type of peace with it to be able to survive in it. But minus being around your ex and those other people I just mentioned, you still can be that true person around with yourself and with friends that you actually trust. And you should be that core person, or that true person to your children. Now, you do have to keep some information private or close hold, because kids tell your ex everything. Now, you don't want to. Now, what I'm not saying you do something with your kids and you say, don't tell your mother or don't tell your father. You just don't tell your kids. You keep that information to yourself. I've made other videos where I've talked about that as well, where I don't know how many times I've been basically burned in situations where I've communicated something to the kids. They've mentioned it to their mom. She then basically decides to take that issue on herself, and or either take it and do it herself, or sabotage our event I'm working with it, or downplay it and talk, basically it's like make it to where it's not that much fun, or just try to take it away. So that's what I'm talking about whenever talking about with your kids. I mean, don't tell them stuff and then say, don't tell your mother or don't tell your father. That's counterproductive. And it also, if your ex is using that, or is basically saying that you're doing stuff like that, well, then you're validating it right there. And the last thing you want to do is validate anything that your ex is trying to say to basically smear you, or to hurt your image or your reputation, especially with your kids. Okay, so bottom line, when you're struggling with this morphed personality that you're having or being forced to adopt, it doesn't mean that it's going to destroy your core person. It doesn't mean it's going to turn you into a narcissist. It's one of those things that you have to do to basically survive in this situation. And like I said earlier, it's unfortunate that you have to do it, but it's one of those steps in this process that you end up having to do. And you can go too far, or you can do a balanced and controlled adaptation of some of those skills, I guess, if you want to call them that, or traits. Traits is a better way to talk about it, and be able to improve your environment because of it. So, but whenever you're worried about the fact that you're changing your core person, you got to look at it in total, right? You have to look at not just how you're acting around your ex, but the overall bigger picture. And as long as you're not losing yourself in that, as long as you can still see yourself in that, then you're okay. So if you've been struggling with this and want to add to the conversation, add it in the comments below. If you like this channel, please subscribe. That really helps Google and YouTube just determine what channels, how channels are doing. Like the video, that helps. If you think somebody could use this video, please share it, and I will chat with you guys in the next video. So take care. Bye.